Hi friend, Megan here. I am going to share a little bit today about why my husband and I decided to move to Peru. And the reason I'm sharing is because we've had a lot more people reach out and ask us why we're here and just ask a little more about our lifestyle. So I am going to go over what brought us here and then some of the trade-offs and some of the benefits of living here in Peru. So my husband and I both grew up in a small town in Pennsylvania in the States. He took one journey that sort of took him all over the country, a bit like a vagabond traveler. And I went to Los Angeles for schooling and then climbed my way up the corporate ladder through a lot of, working for Fortune 500s and tech startups and things like that. So I was about 29, 30 years old, and I had been going through a series of kind of life challenges where I grew up thinking that my life was all about my career and what I would do. And it's something that in the States, I feel like from the time we're really young, the first question out of people's mouth to children is, what are you going to be when you grow up? There's so much focus put onto career. So for me, I'd climbed and worked really hard, multiple jobs, and freelancing at nights and trying to build up my resume, and ended up with a really kind of impressive roster, I guess you could say. But the higher I went up the corporate ladder, the less satisfied I was, and in fact, probably quite the opposite. I felt more depressed, more unhealthy, more lonely, and disconnected. And the other thing is that, like, I kind of kept thinking that this idea of a career would, like, give me meaning or give me purpose. And I actually liked what I did. I did design work for a long, long time and still do it on the side for my family. But the higher I climbed, the more I would realize that it wasn't what I had been sold. Like, I think that I thought that it was going to be really fulfilling and things like that. And I feel like we're kind of given these check boxes along the way, these different chapters that we're supposed to fulfill, like go to a good school, get a good job, have a family, buy a house first, then have a family. Like, there were these sort of things that were set up according to the American dream, and I just kept going through and checking them off and realizing I was really unhappy. And at the same time, I was really kind of going through my own self-discovery, self-awareness, and healing process, therapy process, that was making me less and less afraid of failure. That was like a big one. And less afraid of, like, not looking good to society. And I was also exploring more kind of esoteric things where I was seeing that, I was really interested in anatomy growing up. I was a dancer, and so I was looking into all of this stuff where all of a sudden, like, quantum physics and spirituality were lining up, like old indigenous ideas around, like, the chakra system and the endocrine system were lining up. And I started to, like, just see the world in a lot of a different way. The other thing is, I worked for really high profile clients for years, and I saw the inner workings of them. And as a communications person, I got to read all of the documents and what was posted and what wasn't and how we would change it. And I kind of got to a point where I just didn't want to participate in it anymore. I saw that it was causing people to be fearful and feel like they didn't have enough, so they had to buy more. I saw that it was causing addictions, and that addiction was so much part of the lifestyle. In the Western modern world, you would get applauded for having 200 pairs of shoes and being in style for the season. You would get, accolades if you were a workaholic and or a shopaholic or all of the holics. We were encouraged to have happy hours after work and drink away our paycheck and make poor life decisions. And I just kept feeling like there was more to life than that. And especially because I hadn't climbed up to a high paycheck and all that stuff, I saw the people at the top, like at the very, very top, were really not what was put out there to be perceived. It was a lot of depression, a lot of purposelessness, and I just saw people who were deeply unhappy at the very, very top with all of the money and insane houses that they had a special golf cart just to go from their house down to this private beach. It was crazy. And I was getting invited to like all these fancy parties, and people would just spend insane amounts for one night to show people how impressed they were. And I would see people's insecurities, and I would see how they were all kind of just like lying to themselves, and it was so superficial. I was in LA, and it's definitely, I like to call it like a veneer. Like it's just this like plastic taped on shiny thing that people want to put out there. So anyways, that was a long backstory of what I was seeing and perceiving and how I was thinking differently, and I was going through the therapy process where I didn't want to be driven by fear anymore. I didn't want to be driven by not having enough or feeling like I had to do things even if I really didn't want to do them. And I ended up going through like a pretty massive depression where I was just like, what's the point of all of it? So during that time, I had like a series of kind of synchronicities of people telling me to travel, and that was really incredible. So I just had Peru kind of pop into my mind from an experience I had earlier in my life, and that I really wanted to see Machu Picchu, so I was going to start there. Well, while I was traveling, it just kept pulling me back, and I fell really in love with this area, and truthfully, I felt healthy and happy for the first time in my life, which was sobering, because at 30, to realize I had never felt happy or healthy to that level or full of energy was really sad. That I could go through thinking it was normal, and then to have this level up of like waking up excited to live my life, and like not having acne and feeling no pain, and I was eating real food, and I was out in nature, and I realized I could also freelance during that time, and I was just like, this is crazy. I just had no idea that this world existed. And so I went back after my travels, and I reconnected with Eric, my current husband, my only husband. And he had been questioning a lot of things about how society worked his whole life, and he was also working in rock and roll stage building, and we would just have these long talks like every single night about what we wanted to create in our world, and if there were other ways of living, and what the possibilities were. And at that time, I was actually being like sought after for jobs. So I was going for interviews to like major cities for really high profile jobs, and plenty of money. And every time I would go do it, I would feel just absolutely sick to my stomach. So Eric would ask me, what is it that you really want? Listen to your heart. And I said, Peru is the only thing I can think of. And there's this thing that I started learning when I was traveling about listening to my instincts and listening to my heart, and that every single time I would do that, like these incredible doors would open up, and these wild adventures and things that I had never planned would just sort of like appear in my world. And I was like, you know what, like we are in love, we're about to get married, and every time I think about going back to that world, I feel sick. So we decided to say, we'll try it for a couple years. I had already been down there for about 4 months down here, and in that time, that little bit really helped me see that it was possible, and that I could always return to that world if I wanted to. That world meaning like the really status quo 9 to 5 job, more like 9 to like 10 o'clock at night, honestly. And I knew that had come back after a year of traveling, so I was like, I think we can do this. Let's do it. So we moved down to Peru with all of these kind of big dreams and huge expectations, and then we really had a very sobering landing. Like, we had kind of a honeymoon period where we're like, this is incredible, we're free, we're traveling, we're having all these adventures. But then you kind of realize that when you move, your problems don't just disappear. Like, the things and the patterns that you've had in your life, they're yours for a reason, to learn from, to grow from. But I think sometimes what we do when we move is that we think all of it will just sort of disappear, but it reappears. So, like, challenges in our relationship appeared, and figuring out, the financial, how we're gonna make it work down here, and the follow through, and the friendships, and the language, and the paperwork. Like, all of those things were very real, and things that we still had to face and deal with. And a lot of the huge challenge was that, I think a lot of relationships are built off of this sort of idea, this enamored idea of love and passion. And I think that that's absolutely crucial and wonderful and beautiful in some ways. But I think that for me, developing new ways to see relationships was really important to our continued thriving in Peru, because I feel like a lot of Western people, they don't really spend that much time together. Everybody's working, so you barely have time in the morning before breakfast, commute, get to work, and then you get home late, and it's sort of a rush to get dinner and errands, and a lot of times we're spending most of it on, like, social media or watching movies. And so, like, the actual time that you're with your partner, or with your family, or with anybody really, is very short and brief. Well, when you move somewhere and all of a sudden you're in each other's space all the time, and we didn't know each other that well, there was just a lot that came to the surface for us. So when people are thinking about a move like this, whatever brings them to this point, that the problems don't just disappear. So I think that's, like, the number one expectation to check in on, and to kind of go with it and do that deep inner work to figure out why the patterns are continuing or present, and what they're trying to show us about ourselves. And if we can be open and humble to learn and investigate and be curious about why we do the things that we do, whether it's from trauma or mistrust or betrayals, or just the myriad of things that life can throw in our path, if we can really learn and listen to each other and investigate what's bringing that up, I think that's the thing that helped us survive here, and not just survive, but really thrive in a much lighter and happier, fulfilled way. So when it comes to Peru, and I know I rambled a lot about kind of how we got here and what brought us here to a developed nation where people might consider it as poor. First, the idea of poor is really relative, because the idea is having a certain amount of money in the bank account. But when I look at the quality of life, the cost of living, and the things that are most important, I feel like we make less than I had ever made in my life. But I feel like my freedom to live and choose and what my time looks like and what my life looks like is incredible. And so I don't feel poor at all, even though our cost of living is like about $20,000 for a family of 5 to live in a big house. And I will say there's a lot of coming from a Western world and having all of the entitlements and luck and education and tools to be able to do that. But we also had a pretty incredible experience with a woman who was taking care of Alex early on, where we didn't have the money to pay her for a bit. And I went to her just like, Alberta, I can't pay you, please, let's reset the schedule until we're able to pay. And she looked at me and she was like, Megan, I've got my family home, we've got our cows, we've got our sheep, we've got our huge garden. She was like, we don't really have any expenses, we don't have any debt. So just, I'll keep going because I really like hanging out with Alex, and you pay me when you pay me. I looked at her, dumbfounded and astounded that here in the traditional sense of the word poverty, here was a campesina woman, a woman that lived on a little piece of farm property that had more freedom and abundance than we did with all of our Western luxuries and lifestyle and background. And so it really made me rethink this idea of like developed, undeveloped poverty, wealth, that like her wealth was this freedom to just keep working because she wanted to and like give us the flexibility to figure out the money situation. And it was just incredible. So So anyways, moving to a developed nation, like, or an undeveloped nation, I actually hate the verbiage of it because I don't think undeveloped is really what it is. But that's another story for another day. But the trade-offs of living in Peru are, like, on the surface, the Western trade-offs are the speed of life, the availability of modern conveniences, the bugs. There are mosquitoes, there are spiders, there are some scorpions every once in a while. None of them are deadly, which is great. It's not like if you move to Australia where everything can kill you. It's really quite mild. But I will say, like, we moved into two houses that were completely flea infested. And, like, for anybody that grew up in the States, like, the idea of a flea infested house is like, oh my gosh. So I went through a lot trying to figure out how to deal with it. But now it's just normal. Like, there are cows and there are farms and there are sheep and people have dogs and cats that are running around. Like, it's pretty normal to have fleas. But for me to process that was really challenging. So, but you know, you figure it out. We planted a lot of like aromatics that fight the bugs, and you know, gave our dogs flea medication, and got a vacuum and washed our stuff more deeply and more often until the fleas were gone. And they're gone now, and we haven't had issues with them for years, which is amazing. But I also went through this process where I actually learned that the bites that we have are these, it's almost like nature's acupuncture. It like releases the heat from the body, and you can actually trace them and see where the lines are on the meridian lines. And it's nature's acupuncture. It's releasing heat from our body and making us kind of like bring it to the surface. And after a while, you stop getting bit once your body is more clear. So that was kind of an amazing gift of it. So what we've done is, like, anytime there are challenges, we really try to figure out what the gifts are, what the learnings are, what the things are there for in our life to teach us, because I personally think everything happens for a reason, and it's about how we respond and what we learn from it. And then we don't have to repeat it anymore. But if we don't learn the lesson, it continues. And I actually went through this whole process of thinking through the words react and respond. So react, I almost feel like you have to, if you're in a state of reaction where your emotions are driving you and you literally can't see straight and it's just coming from this like gut triggered reaction, that if you don't learn from it and you're reacting, you just do it over and over and over and over again until you do learn. The other way is to respond, and like pond is at the end, ponder. So it's like, I think of it as re-ponder. Like, if you think through and you go deeper and you ask yourself what it's about, you don't actually have to relive it over and over again. So that's how we've handled being here with all of the challenges that come up, because there really are a lot. Another one is that there's no hot water in the sinks, and the showers are these old, like, electric flash showers that if there's not enough water pressure, they don't get hot. Or we've got a gas shower where if they're not installed correctly, they can cause carbon monoxide poisoning. We learned a very challenging way. So there's like lots of things that were installed incorrectly. Another one is that there's no gas valve in the toilets here, and so all of the toilets are kind of stinky, and so we learned how to like ventilate them, flush things down, burn some Palo Santo or sage or whatever, and deal with it. And we've had to reinstall like toilet seals because they always leak because the gas is backed up. It's crazy. Like, these things that we very much take for granted, they're very different here. And so another one is that there's no outdoor heating or cooling. There you go, outdoor. Why would there be outdoor heating? That's weird. But your body like takes a while to adjust, and we've learned to like bundle up at 5 o'clock when the sun goes down because the heat just removes, or like to only live in adobe houses because they actually really hold the heat or hold the cool depending on what time of year it is. So again, incredible gifts. Your body becomes much more in tune with the weather. You pay attention more. You learn how to like close the windows at certain times of day, or like open the curtains to let heat in. So you're really in tune with how nature works, which I think is kind of amazing. And we did, after like 6 years, put in a fireplace, which was really like a wonderful treat, and we became so grateful for it on cold nights. But we lived without it for years, and we just got lots of sweaters. So you'll see I have many, many different layers and kinds of sweaters because it just gets chilly. Even though the weather here is pretty mellow, it doesn't get too much colder than like 40, 50 degrees, but that's like 6 degrees in your house. So you learn to adjust and be flexible, but I will say that a lot of people that move here, that we've seen that come and go, these things become very challenging. And if you're not problem solving, or you're reacting, or you want it to be a way that it's just not, then it will become very difficult. So dust is another one. We have dirt roads, and the dust kind of kicks up. So if you're OCD like I used to be, there's pretty much dust on everything all the time. And that's that. And like, you're walking on dirt roads, it's rainy season, and things just get muddy or dirty, and so you learn ways around it, or you just don't care as much. And then another one is, like, there's a lot of cultural issues of different ways of thinking, and for us, again, we try to take each one with a grain of salt, realize that we are guests here, and do our best to really, like, try to understand why people do what they do. Because I think there's one mentality that you can come in to another country, and this is if you're traveling, or even if you just have friends from a different place, that like there's this assumption that your way is right and that their way is wrong, therefore. And I guess I don't see it that way. I really came here to learn and realize that their environment is healthier and there isn't as much pollution. And so one thing that's really interesting is, like, people will be like, you know, why don't people get entrepreneurial here, and like, why don't they want to make money off their land? And it's such a Western mentality to like capitalism, capitalize and exploit the land to like make as much money. And yes, of course, we need to live, and money is not bad, but there's this drive to turn it into cash. But here, it's not necessary. There's this concept of irony, of reciprocity, and of giving back, and of balance. And I feel like there was an example of a woman selling oranges, and a friend of mine was holding a retreat, and she went and she was like, hey, can I buy all of your oranges? How much are they? And the woman told her, and she was like, great, I'll take them all. And the woman was like, no, my job is to sit here and sell oranges. She's like, yeah, but you can go to the wholesale market and buy more. You can take your money and just go home and do nothing. And the woman was like, no, my job's to sit here. I mean, and on the surface, any Westerner is going to be like, what the heck? Like, I just want to buy your oranges. You're selling oranges. You can make money and be done. But there's this kind of present mentality here of literally not knowing what else to do, which partially education, partially, belief systems and ideologies, but there's this other part of like living so much in the present moment that that's not the end goal. It's not transactional. It's this state of being that I can't really explain, but there's just not this push. And if you look at the environment here in Peru, like, people aren't trying to make the most money off of their land. They're like, well, I have enough to live. I have some extra to sell at the market. I might be able to trade some for this or that. And to do additional work, or to think through that process to get that additional capital isn't really there. It's really this mindset of like, we're always going to be taken care of. We're always going to give back. It's not even a thought process. So we've learned a lot about that, but it can be very frustrating. Same thing with time. There's this time of like synchronistic timing where everybody just kind of shows up when they feel like showing up. So we had a dinner party where we invited expats and Peruvians, and like all of our friends kind of showed up, and all the Westerners were there like on time, and like all the Peruvians showed up like 2 hours later, and we were kind of like, oh, oh, let's pull up some chairs. And we were a little surprised. And I remember thinking about how my mom might have reacted if people just kind of showed up after most of their food was eaten. And they brought dogs and they brought friends. And we were like, oh, do we have enough people? I mean, it was a little bit disconcerting. So there are like a lot of cultural things around time and expectations and gift giving um, and like thinking ahead and problem solving in the way that Westerners would that isn't the same here. So it can cause a lot of frustration for people. Um, and then another one is doing paperwork here. Like the systems, I have to say, are very efficient in the States, all very tracked and efficient and quick and online. Whereas here, like you still literally have to go and pay your bill at the office and wait in line. And it's paid every single month, and you go and do it. You pay your internet sometimes, you pay your electric, you just put that into your schedule. So that's a longer list than I think I was planning, but just an overview of some of the things that we found. Definitely surprising, sometimes very, very challenging, but also ultimately for us it like taught us to slow down, it taught us to be grateful, it taught us to kind of problem solve in different ways and also see from other people's perspective that there's not really a right way and a wrong way, there's a reason. So those are our quick trade-offs and how we got here and kind of what our intention was. And then I will get into like the benefits really quickly, which for me are that far outweigh any of the sort of negative trade-offs. And that's being in nature. It's nature being like literally around our house, being able to walk with my boys, just like incredible historic ruins everywhere, and like a sense of history and ancestry that are profound and incredible to be part of. It's my relationships with my neighbors and how much I learn from them, and it's having the time now. Well, the cost of living certainly, but because of that, having the time to invest in my own happiness, my family, and projects that I really care about that maybe might not be financially beneficial, but just feel really good and exciting to be part of. Like I work with the Organic Farmers Collective, and I work with the Indigenous midwife who allows women to give birth naturally, which I think is so important, and have time for friends, and running into people and having real conversations and an openness where not everybody's rushed or like, oh yeah, we should do that, and nobody does it. Like there's the time. There's much more space. And then the other thing is the less push for technology, and this one's changed a lot since I've been here. But like we didn't have a smartphone for 6-7 years. We didn't have Wi-Fi in our house, which was like one of the most incredible resets of how I work my life out and how having like way more time for my life stuff. And there's also the people. Like there's a really cool community of people that are really caring and compassionate and aware and like genuinely working on personal growth and putting good things out there, and that to me is really important, that we can just kind of be authentic and get into deeper conversations. Like it's very normal here to get into like a very deep conversation very quickly, whereas sometimes I feel like in the Western world it stays really superficial or it stays really surface level. And I don't think it's at anyone's fault. I think it's just kind of part of the culture. And yeah, so those are some of the benefits. And I also love the weather here, and I love the incredible food selections here, and yeah, I love being able to slow down. It's been so helpful for me to slow down and like be a little bit more. And so yeah, those are the reasons we're here. Also, final thing, my husband and I are really, really big into like self-sustainability and resilience. He's very much into learning permaculture, eco-building. He builds his own forge out of recycled materials and builds tools and knives and jewelry, and he's really interested in learning old practices and how we did things before this modern world was like, we're gonna do it for you, and like here you can have it, just pay us a bunch of money. And we're like, great, but we kind of forget where they come from, and the craft and the trade that goes into it, and the importance of those things and keeping them alive. And for me, it's a lot about healing. It's a lot about sharing like happier ways of being because I was so sad and angry for most of my life, and I feel like a lot of us feel sad and angry, and I just know that there's other ways of being, and I'm grateful for that every day and just happy to share it. So so our plans are to move and purchase land and share that land and build resilient communities where we're growing food, and we're just doing things in even simpler ways than we already are, because we find it satisfying and we find it's joyful and fun, and that there are a lot of people thinking in this way. So that's kind of our next move. We're not in a rush, we're kind of putting it out there, we're going on little trips, but it's been nice for me to kind of go little by little from like pure kind of like capitalist drive consumption workaholism to, you know, moving to a city, to moving to a smaller village, to starting to find the joy in these different things, and then being like, no, this is really what we want and where we're going. So that's sort of the big picture of how we transitioned from the Western world to this sort of slower hybrid thing. And there are challenges along the road. So, but so many good things. So, if you are interested in Peru moving or making a big life transition or moving in a direction of more simplicity or more responsibility, self-sustainability, feel free to reach out to us. We're really open about the lifestyle, and it's part of the reason we share, because we do think that there's a lot more people interested in this kind of thing, and it is a really big jump. I actually had somebody be like, oh, you're so lucky, and I was like, I mean, yeah, definitely, I feel super lucky, but we also made some like really big life changes that I think, in all honesty, were completely terrifying. We had no idea what we were going to do or where we were going to land, but we just had this idea and this instinct and this feeling, and we did it. We love it. So if you are thinking about just any kind of move in that general direction of what we were talking about with our values, feel free to reach out. It's really nice to connect with other people that don't think you're just crazy. I did have many friends think I was nuts for leaving Los Angeles. Eric too. But I will say on the other side, it's quite lovely. So that was my long video today about Peru. Feel free to like and subscribe. I really don't know what kind of content I'm going to be doing. I am passionate about a lot of things, and I will be sharing them as I go. Love from Peru. We'll talk soon.